Hi everyone, and welcome to another installment of Discover at Home. My name is Annie McDonald. I'm naturalist and volunteer coordinator at North Lakeland Discovery Center up in beautiful Manitowish Waters, Wisconsin. And as you can obviously tell, spring has clearly faded into summer here in the Northwoods, not just in terms of temperature. It's gotten a lot hotter up here in the last couple of weeks, and our wildflowers have changed from some of our spring wildflowers to our more summer blooming wildflowers. But a few other phenology changes have been happening as well. You might have noticed that it's gotten a lot quieter up here. Not in terms of the tourists, but in terms of the birds. You're probably noticing fewer and fewer birds coming to your bird feeder. You're not having to feed it quite as, or fill it quite as often, unless you've got a bear frequenting your region. And it's also a little bit quieter in the morning. So some of us really enjoy that springtime. The last about 4 weeks ago, that early morning symphony of bird songs, or depending on if you're not a morning person, it might be more of a cacophony. But it's gotten a lot quieter over the last 3 to 4 weeks, and that's really because a lot of our birds, particularly our songbirds, are in the nesting phase. And nesting is just such a phenomenal aspect of a bird's already pretty interesting life history, and we're going to explore some of the different nests of our Northwoods birds. And so nesting style really depends a lot on the bird species. Of course, it's very species dependent. Some of our bird species up here in the Northwoods have already finished raising their first brood, so they've already got those first nestlings, their first babies fledged, and they might even be on to their second nesting cycle. One of those bird species has a nest right above me, and it's really hard to see up here with this iPad. I'll try to get a better view a little bit later, and we'll take a really close look at that nest. But they can sometimes, depending on the species, can produce upwards of 10 plus offspring in a season. Truly a cheaper by the dozen reproductive strategy. And that bird species that's up above me in a nest is the American robin. Let's take a closer look at the American robin's nest. So here we've got the American robin's nest. It's just that dark spot up there right off of the branch, and you can actually see some of the grasses hanging down off of it. And it's actually held together by a lot of mud. Let's take a closer look. Here we can see a robin's nest nice and up close. And if you have a robin nesting on your property, you're probably pretty aware of it, because they're very hard to ignore because they make a lot of noise. They're very, very defensive of their nest, or territorial. And they create these really big nest structures, this big bowl of a nest, or kind of a deep cup, that's often built either up high in a tree, off on a tree fork on a limb where it forks, but still has enough support. Sometimes they build them in a shrub. Almost never, though, do you see them on the ground. They're very big, robust nests made oftentimes of grasses, like you can see here, lots and lots of dried grasses, some pieces of roots as well. Occasionally you'll even see bits of cloth or string worked in, but how it's all held together is by mud. And so the female builds the nest and carries all of these nesting materials, including wet mud, that she then uses to cement together all of the other nesting materials, and kind of cements it into that shrub or onto the fork of a tree limb. And they typically have about 4 eggs the female lays. She does all of the incubation over about 2 weeks or so. And of course, that's where that term robin's egg blue comes from, that beautiful blue color of the robin's egg. So here's another type of nest, again in a cup or bowl style of nest, but this one was created by a bird called the eastern Phoebe. And as you can see here, it's mounted on this artificial little ledge to kind of recreate where exactly this nest was found. So eastern phoebes are in the flycatcher family. They're common up here in the Northwoods. You often hear them in the morning or even into midday calling out their own name, kind of a Phoebe, Phoebe type of call. Is one of the easiest ways to identify these kind of gray or slate colored birds. But they love to live in, rocky woodlands, farmland, suburban areas. Again, like I said, they're a common bird here in the Northwoods. And they build this kind of semicircular nest on shelf-like projections. So you often see them associated with human dwellings, such as rafters or the sides of homes, right underneath overhangs of roofs, in boat houses, things like that, as well as along windowsills, or in more, rural or non-associated with human settings, more wild settings, oftentimes on kind of rocky ledges. Often also, again, like underneath bridges, things like that. So the female builds the nest, and she utilizes a number of different materials, particularly grasses, as well as mud that she utilizes to then cement it to that cliff or shelf-like projection. So you can see here a lot of different grasses, moss, as well as mud utilized to cement it to the structure itself. And it's built completely, like I said, by the female, and she can lay 3 to 6 or so eggs per year, and sometimes she'll even have 2 broods if resources are plentiful enough. So here's yet another nest of a common bird that we have here in the Northwoods. Again, it's a little cup or bowl-shaped nest, and this is created by the bird called the chipping sparrow. And our chipping sparrows are, like I said, they're common up here. They really like grassy forest, open woodlands, edge habitat, backyards. Here in the Minocqua area at my house, I often see them foraging on the ground for seeds and insects just on the lawn, as well as even in my gravel driveway. So you'll often see them foraging on the ground, but the female is responsible again for building the nest. She does all of the work just over 3 to 4 days, while the male stands guard and watches over the process. But she builds the nest just 3 to 10 feet off of the ground, usually in a shrub. So it's hidden deep in foliage typically, and what she uses is all these different grass-like materials, grasses, plant materials, rootlets, but it's a pretty flimsy little nest that she hides deep in that shrub. And then what she does to hold it all together is she actually lines it with animal hair. And this nest was actually found by a master bird bander up in the Mercer area. And you can see here, it's actually lined with bear hair. And so the lining also helps to hold it together and increases, of course, the warmth of the nest, or protection for the nest, for the eggs, as well as the nestlings, the fledglings. And she will lay 2 to 7 whitish eggs, sometimes even to a lightish blue or slightly streaked, and is capable of having 1 to even more like 3 broods per season, depending on resource availability. But here you can see that dark hair in there is black bear hair that she lines her nest with. So far we've seen a couple of different types of nests, that of the tree nesting robin and the cliff or shelf style nesting eastern Phoebe, to the low shrub nesting style of the chipping sparrow. But here we have another nest type. So this is a cavity nester, and a bird that nests often in hollowed out trees, fence posts, as well as takes easily to nest boxes or birdhouses. This is the nest of a tree swallow. Again, tree swallows are another common bird that we have up here in the Northwoods, and this nest was actually found in a bluebird box, or a bluebird house, at the Discovery Center just a couple of weeks ago. And oftentimes our tree swallows are solitary nesters, just like most of our other birds, but occasionally if resources are high and there's a lot of nesting sites, they'll sometimes nest communally or in larger groups, or in another term, become a true social nest. Tree swallow nest, as you can see, is pretty unique. There's a lot of woody debris in here, as well as pine needles, plant fiber, and even some moss, but you'll notice that there's a lot of bird feathers. And these feathers are not from the tree swallow itself. They're actually collected by the female tree swallow when she's building the nest from other birds. And so a lot of these feathers in this nest are actually from mergansers and other waterfowl that were likely around State House Lake at the Discovery Center. And finally, last but not least, here we have an eggshell remnant from another nesting style. So this bird actually nests right on the ground. It's the Canada goose. So instead of nesting up in a tree or in a shrub or in a nest box or a cavity, the Canada geese, of course, nest right on the ground. Their habitats are, of course, as most of you guys well know, are varied. Of course, they like to be near waters, but they really also like lawns a lot too, and grassy areas. So, of course, that grass provides food because they're actually capable of digesting grass, but they love those lawns because they provide an unobstructed view from predators, of course. But they build a nest oftentimes on a slightly elevated or raised site near or on water. Sometimes muskrat houses, which are commonplace here in the Northwoods on our marshy areas. And the female selects the site and does all of the nest construction. And the materials that she uses, she just basically makes a good size kind of cup or depression in the ground, and then lines it with dry grasses, moss, some of the other materials that we've seen in other nests. But then she actually uses her own body feathers and down to line that shallow depression before she starts laying her eggs. And she'll typically lay 2 to 8 eggs per brood. They usually just have 1 brood per season, but you'll see oftentimes in the summer here what we kind of call gang broods. So of 2 or more families or broods that travel and feed and loaf together. And of course, as the saying goes, the community that loafs together stays together. Well, I hope you all have gained a little bit of insight or a little bit more appreciation for some of the nesting behaviors of our common birds of the Northwoods. Just remember, the nesting behaviors of birds is just one of the most remarkable facets of their already interesting life histories. You know, each bird species exhibits a different nesting technique, from their nest site selection to their division of labor between the male and the female, from their the actual materials used to the construction of the nest. Birds just display this phenomenal diversity in their nests, from extremely simplistic, like our Canada goose, to the far more complex, like the Baltimore oriole, that actually weaves together a beautiful basket-style nest. So remember, when it comes to raising a bird family, it's all in an on-nest day's work. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the program today, everybody. And please visit our website, www.discoverycenter.net. There you can find information and details about some of our upcoming programs. We've got some hiking trips coming up, as well as pontoon tours. We've got canoe trips as well, and even a bike trip coming up. So there, like I said, at www.discoverycenter.net, you can find all of the information and details regarding our upcoming programs. We will have social distancing guidelines in place. And at the website, you can also find info on how to become a member and how to volunteer. We hope to see you soon, and take care.